Hi everybody, Matt Lawton here. This is the Astrological Winds channel, and I'm going to take a look at the astrological weather forecast for the week of June 14th through the 20th. And in a way, it's not the most super active week, but in a way, we're in the middle of the deep, dark kind of place in the sense of the Saturn-Uranus square this week, because today, Monday the 14th, is the middle point of that square. And if you remember, I've been talking about this all year. This is the main driving energy of the year 2021 for humans and the planet Earth, and what in general is happening in the background, not only on the macro and social levels, but also happening very much so in people's individual lives. And that is the continued breakdown of the structures that we've relied upon for so long, and how they're falling short in the new world, in the current circumstances, and the shocking things that seemingly are going on in the world and in people's lives. So what we're seeing is an instability of the structures, and not so we have the second or the retrograde hit of this square of 3 hits exact today. And not only is that going on, but like I said last week, Ceres, the asteroid that actually means much about nurturing and getting the things we need, is in Taurus right now also with Uranus and conjunct Uranus, and therefore squaring Saturn right during this second or middle hit. So how much that timing just lines up, because we see how the events of the past couple of years in the world, in civilization, has changed so many, everyone's lives really. I think it's really affected everybody, and we continue to see that. And so like many people are feeling this insecurity of not knowing where or when or how or stable the things that they're used to having to meet their needs are at this point. Are they in some state of flux, some instability, some time of change? For all of us, really, they are. And it really, how acutely it's hitting different people is the question. Now, this week in particular, not only do we have that exact square, but both lights, both the moon and the sun, are triggering that square also. Now the moon, as I've said before, every week when the moon goes into one of the fixed signs, it is going to aspect the Uranus and Saturn square one day, and that day will always be a very high tension day emotionally in dealing with those things, with the realization that structures around us are falling down or being replaced, and what they're being replaced by is not really clear yet. It's unstable, it's quick and rapid, and many of the things in a very kind of experimental phase, so they're not necessarily going to be what ultimately replaces those things, but a lot of like kind of maybe hit and misses going on, so to speak. But when the moon, so today on Monday, today is the day the moon is in a fixed sign in Leo, and therefore is opposing Saturn and squaring Uranus, creating a fixed T-square. And a fixed T-square has such great tension in it, because once again, that fixed energy is so locked in to doing a thing a certain way, and it's and change, although inevitable and happening all the time around us, and we have to admit that is part of our reality. For many of us, it is a very, very difficult thing or challenging thing to deal with. So here, when we get the moon involved, emotionally we get involved with this situation too. And so like, therefore, like, what we can end up feeling, and when you think about both Saturn and Uranus, when you think about both those planets, they can be kind of individualistic signs or planets or lone wolf kind of energy at times. They're not, necessarily needing like the socializing aspect of things. So when you think about that, when the moon gets involved and we're feeling upset about the things falling apart around us, the moon gets involved with two planets that have a tendency, especially when they're feeling triggered in a negative kind of way, have a tendency to kind of like become more individualistic and more isolated and more on an island. And so therefore with this fixed T-square, we may really feel like that, like emotionally this week, and especially the early part of the week, we may really feel like isolated, or and all of what that brings in. For some people that can be like very, very depressing, that kind of thing. So we're gonna really, and then like, there's that Uranus part too, which is highly individualistic and highly rebellious when it's feeling emotionally triggered. But once again, very individualistic or subjective way. And so like this isolation can be something emotionally of feeling like, just alone, even if just inside, even if you're like, still communicating and having relationships going on, that, you can feel like with the problems that you're struggling with in relation to this Saturn-Uranus square and structure falling apart in your life, that, no one can really quite get it. So like there's that kind of feeling of that isolation or loneliness. Now also the sun this week is in a semi-square to Uranus and a sesquiquadrate to Saturn. So the other light, the other luminary is also very involved with the square this week as it turns exact, and therefore showing basically that the situation that we're in, all of us, has not completely developed yet, that there's things that need to still kind of occur in their natural time. They can't be really rushed. They have to unfold as they will, and that, there's really no solution really available yet. So there's the restriction of that in the path that you have ahead of you, and then there's also the frustration that comes in of wanting to do something, and then that there is some exciting possibility out there, that there's like insight and connections that have been made that maybe make you feel like, there's some possibility out there, but still seemingly beyond the horizon, not really in the event horizon yet as far as a manifestation is occurring. It's still something that is being developed inside the mind and within relationship and experience still, that needs to kind of happen. So, and of course during Mercury retrograde, that makes sense too. This is really not the time to be making any kind of big decision during a square of Saturn-Uranus in the middle of Mercury retrograde, both luminaries involved with the square. So just a lot of this like energy is going to be felt really acutely right now. This feeling like block, this feeling of things falling apart and wanting to do something about it and trying to find the right solution, and yet, not really being able to do that. And if any of you have like, planets or points in your chart in those fixed signs that are being hit by this Uranus-Pluto square, then you're going to feel it really, really, really acutely. If you have your sun, moon, ascendant, midheaven, Mercury, Venus, or Mars, in particular, any of those, that, this can be a very upsetting time. Now, it's really interesting, too. When you think about Uranus and Saturn, it's two very different energies. They really, in many ways, are oppositional. And yet there's some people right now, the issue is they don't want change to occur. So, their pain is from holding on to what they feel has worked well for them before, even though it's obvious it's not working that well anymore. Whereas other people are wanting change to come in and it's not happening fast enough. They feel like, that, the structure and the old stuff is not going away quick enough, and that they would like to see the change occur much quicker. But so see how both those energies, which are, in a way oppositional, are being triggered by the very same energetic signature coming down from the heavens. It's really just a matter of perspective and our own judgment that we put on these situations that have us feel it. But, so a lot of us are feeling really upset about people, places, situations that we feel are blocking us, holding us back from change. So many of us may be ready to move forward and leave behind those situations now. Yet, it's, like I said, not really the best time to be making the best decisions or making those decisions to move right now. It's more a time to kind of think about how you're going to execute that. Whereas, other people right now are just in that same situation of trying to figure out ways to keep things as they are, and fight what that change is. So they're also feeling a lot of this frustration. So what you're going to see once again is there could be a lot of tension in relationships, especially older ones that, you're no longer feeling like, hey, I'm not going to partake in this anymore because either one, you're holding me back from the change I want, or two, you are one of the people who's dragging me toward a change that I don't want. So very, very interesting kind of energy going on in relation to all this. And here we are right, in the middle of it. So it can be really dark, heavy stuff for a lot of us right now as we watch the world that we were so used to rapidly changing and feeling a lot of confusion as to what to do, a lot of blockage of anything we try to do, or things going awry or off from, or not really sticking or planning out when we make attempts to appease this energy. So we are in the middle of it, and it feels really quiet and new after that new moon eclipse last week. And there's a lot of things that you can look at the bigger picture and see how a lot of this stuff is changing the world. Like when you even think about the Uranus and Taurus and the Earth sign with Ceres there, and here I am in the Southwest where a large section of the country is under severe drought conditions, where really the whole structure of what's been built out here since it was settled 170 years ago in the making has to be questioned. Is it sustainable as is? It doesn't look like it. And there's certain things that people can't control, so they're going to have to adjust to those structures changing. So that's just one small example of where we're seeing it. And remember, with that, all that Taurus energy, Earth changes. Everyone is seeing now, this is a real thing that, no matter what side of a spectrum, politically or socially or whatever you're on, that, it doesn't matter what the cause of something like, say, a drought is. The reality is it's happening. And so that structure is changing. And it's changing rapidly. And people are going to be forced to make some new, very quick decisions on how to deal with situations. This is just one example of many. And, and some of the generations of us right now, too, there's, many of us, we're born with a generational imprint, really. Really 10 years, really, things shift enough astrologically that, there's a generational input. And so many, those groups and blocks of people that were born under certain generations are, collectively as an age group, having these longer term transits too affecting them, that also, has people deeply questioning where they're at. And either, there can be a lot of confusion, or there can be a lot of hope, or anywhere in between. So, you can see people in different generations reacting to these things differently. So, very interesting week here. It's kind of quiet and dark in many ways under the new moon, solar eclipse, Mercury retrograde, and a retrograde hit of all this, and not feeling like much can be done individually by anyone. There doesn't seem to be a lot of people waking up satisfied right now with the way things are and are going. So you can see how we've been all drawn into this energy. Now, interestingly enough, some other stuff going on this week. On Monday, today too, Mars is quincunx Jupiter. Very interesting. A lot of energy there, right? But it's awkward and it's off. It's the kind of thing where, it's the big idea that hasn't been really thought through. It's pushing too hard, and then getting results that are really not expected whatsoever. So, it's one of these things that you really have to discipline the energy if you're going to be able to work with that energy well. And it is a big ball of energy when Mars and Jupiter get together, but there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made in order to make things happen with a Mars quincunx Jupiter. Now, interestingly enough, there's another quincunx later in the week that I wanted to mention too. I think it was on Thursday. The Sun is quincunx Pluto, and this is another really interesting aspect. It's an aspect of letting go. It's an aspect of separation in a pretty big way. It's an aspect of leaving behind the people you power struggle with, the authority type people in your life, the people pulling the strings from behind, seeing their influence and kind of breaking away and separating from that energy. So it can be kind of intense, it can be you could go through a lot of really strong feelings while doing that, that can get very extreme. But it is a time where you're pretty clear that you see, in order to make the changes that you want in your life, to make the transformation that you want in your life, that certain people, situations, things, places have to be let go, have to, be cleared out. And this like resisting kind of ball of energy that you may be involved with them that goes back and forth kind of like in a power struggle just really needs to kind of be left behind now that you're clear with where the reality of that situation or relationship is at. So interesting energy there, and it definitely can be rebellious against authority, old authority in our life that we no longer want to put up with. Also, next weekend on Saturday, I believe it is, Jupiter is going to go retrograde. So it's going to join, some of those other planets that are already retrograde, Saturn and Mercury, and it's going to like basically give us 4 months. It will be retrograde until about mid-October, and so it's going to give us about 4 months to really reassess our value systems. Now it's interesting. Remember, Jupiter did go into Pisces a few weeks ago, into one of its strongest signs, and probably gave a lot of people a lot of spiritual inspiration, empathy and compassion, possibly some artistic, but now it's going to backtrack into Aquarius, where really it's spending most of this year. And by July 29th, it'll be back into Aquarius until pretty much Christmas Eve. So for the most part, Jupiter heading back to where it really is spending most of 2021 in Aquarius, so I think what it's going to do is it's going to realize a lot of the things that seem to be really interesting new ideas that it was being exposed to earlier this year when Jupiter was in Aquarius is now has to really, they've got to prove themselves out to you. Like if you're really going to get behind some new plan, some new organization, some new ball of knowledge, something like that, that it will be like have to like really be reassessed and how it fits, and does it fit into your value system, into your philosophies of life. And I think, on a social level, because Jupiter is one of the 2 social planets, we may see a lot of things having to do with the law, medicine, higher education that can call in a lot of questions, seeing a lot of that stuff really already happening in those areas. Upon reflection, people looking back at things that have happened this past few months or so and really starting to wonder, how does that really fit in, and like that somehow, and see how some of this stuff is like really highly questionable as far as like people's value systems and their arrogance and things like that behind it. So we're going to have 4 months to really reassess all that. The last thing I wanted to mention was the sun is going into Cancer on Sunday, and that is the beginning of the summer solstice, and the winter in the southern hemisphere, actually. And sun going into Cancer is when we really get into home, family, things like that, become really important to us. So in a time when we're feeling these insecurities, the things I was talking about earlier, Cancer energy can really circle the wagons and really make it to a point where they are very protective of who and what they have already. So look for that kind of energy to increase to, even like nationalism, things like that, because people get really protective. But otherwise, they really want to be with their family, hanging out, doing things like that. All right, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I'm available for all kinds of readings. My email is matthue823@gmail.com. This blog is a free service. Please pass it on to anybody that would be interested. That's the best way for you to pay me back. If you'd like to drop a donation, that email is my Zelle and Venmo accounts too. And if you want a reading, like I said, all kinds of readings available, just email me. One more time, it's matthure823@gmail.com. Also, I have beginner classes for anyone who's interested in that. Set you up on Dropbox with that for $25 a class. Individual classes, or if you want to do a whole kind of curriculum kind of thing. All right, available on all kinds of podcasts too, and you can also always become a follower on the YouTube channel here. All right, until next week, this is Matt Lawton. This is the Astrological Winds channel. I'll be signing off, and next week I know Mercury's going direct, so we'll start to get out of some of this. Until then, hang in there.